Douglas County's elected officials and the school officials who are in attendance. So for those of you in attendance, could you please stand? Thank you for coming tonight. We really appreciate you being here with us. Great. Next, I'd like to thank the organizations that helped put this evening together. The Douglas County School District, the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, and the Douglas County Youth Initiative. I'd also like to give a special thanks to the Shiloh House for providing this wonderful space for us. You guys are just an incredible community partner, so thank you. And then last but not least, I want to thank the Douglas County School District BASE program, the before and after care program. They came and they donated their time to provide child care tonight for parents who otherwise might not have been able to attend. So thank you very much, BASE program.
Are you going to be able to advance the slides?
All right, and so now representatives from each of our partners will come up and talk for a little bit, and I get the pleasure of introducing our wonderful superintendent, Dr. Thomas Tucker. So thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good
afternoon.
Now, you can do better than that, not just because your superintendent is up to speaking, because of the importance of tonight's event. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good
Afternoon.
Much better, much better. Stephanie, Dr. Crawford, and Mrs. Ingalls have me on a tight rein tonight. They know I like to talk, and so they reduced me from 5 minutes or 20 minutes down to about 3 or 4 bullet points. Now, you know I'm going to go off script, right? But I will be mercifully brief. I want to talk a little bit about tonight's meeting and some of the things that we want to bring to the forefront. First and foremost, positive learning environments lead to healthy and happy students, and they do well. Secondly, our mental health and prevention personalized learning teams work collaboratively to support students' physical, social, and emotional needs at all levels. Universal, targeted, and intensive. I'll spend a couple minutes talking about each of the three. At the universal level efforts, they include teaching all students the knowledge and skills to understand and manage their emotions, build healthy relationships, and achieve life goals. This is done through prevention work such as Sources of Strength. Many of you may have heard of these programs. Universal social emotional curriculum, restorative practices, mindfulness practices, and suicide prevention training for staff, students, and the community. At the targeted level, professionals are doing group work with students, safety assessments, and connecting family with services. At the intensive level, students receive comprehensive services based on individual plans and services that increase safety and skill building. The district crisis team responds to schools when students have been exposed to a major traumatic event. Now, this is a serious business, and this is why I told you I would go off script, right? Because that's kind of how I do, right, Stephanie? This is serious business when we talk about the mental health needs of our students. 2 days ago, I received a call from one of our parents, and I won't say who the parent is or the school. And she said to me, Thomas, and we know each other on a first name basis, I'm here at the hospital. My child has attempted suicide. Thank God her child did not complete it and is on his or her way to recovery. This is serious business. It's not only happening here in the Douglas County School District, it is happening across America. I am pleased to work with talented people like Nancy and Stephanie and all of our folks in our personalized learning area. But I'm also pleased to work with governmental officials. 2 of them are here now. 2 of our 3 county commissioners are here now. And I'll introduce our outstanding undersheriff here in a minute. She'll come after me. All of us know the importance of this. Our Board of Education in particular, I have 7 board of directors. They saw fit a couple months ago to ask you all, to continue to invest in the well-being of our students. And what we do know we cannot start when students are in high school. Let's start early. Let's try to reach our students. Let's try to mitigate serious consequences of our young people when they're in elementary, middle, and in middle school. In high school, we can do some things, but I think if we work hard early on, we can really improve their outcomes. So we will be asking you all, our taxpayers here in Douglas County, to help us ensure that every school, we have 91 schools in our district, that every school will not allow more than a 1 to 250 student ratio per school counselor. Per school counselor. Right now we don't have school counselors in all of our buildings. We have them in most. And so we need to make sure that we have at least one caring adult for each one of our students, so that I won't get a call or you won't get a call at 9 o'clock at night from a parent saying, my student has overdosed on pills. We also want to build a climate that's conducive for treatment as well, where students feel safe to come forward and talk with any adult, and also talk with their peers about issues that they're having. Sometimes students feel more comfortable talking with their peers. At Thunder Ridge High School, there is a program that's called Oasis. Now, if you get bored this weekend or you get bored tonight, please take some time and look at the Board of Education's board meeting last night, where this group of students came together to address the mental health crises that our students are experiencing, not just at Thunder Ridge, but across the district. It is a fabulous, fabulous program created by students for students. And then the last part of this, we talked about all of us coming together. I want to applaud our county commissioners. This is near and dear in their hearts. We were at a governmental breakfast this morning at 7 o'clock. I've been going since about 6:30 this morning, but that's okay. We're in this fight for our children. And the kickoff of the program was about mental health and how police, the fire department, schools, and government are coming together to address this most important issue. And I'm going to say it's probably, not probably, the most important issue facing our students today, and that's their mental health. So I ask you to join us in ensuring that our students have the best mental health services in America. Thank you. Now, this time, it is my pleasure to introduce one of our fighters in this war on mental health. And that is our very own Douglas County Under Sheriff, Holly Nicholson Clute. Let's give her a round of applause.
We are so glad to have you here. Thank you. I'm Holly Nicholson Clute. And I wanted to say, first of all, I'm very proud to be here. I'm proud to be part of this partnership with the school district and youth initiative, with all of our other partners and the commissioners, to really combat this epidemic of suicide. Douglas County's taken suicide prevention very seriously. And since the late 2000s, about 2008, when we transitioned from DARE to our YES program, we wanted more. We wanted to be able to add things like suicide prevention to our curriculum, add some of those things that were challenging our students here now. And Dr. Tucker said it right. It's those relationships with students from the school district, from parents, from other entities, from the sheriff's office. It's why we have school resource officers, because we realized that having them in school, having that contact with kids, having those relationships makes a difference. Douglas County Sheriff's is involved with the mental health initiative. We're involved with these critical incident training, crisis response teams, officers. Mental health is a big deal. It's a big deal not just in schools, but in the community. But in schools, we can make a difference with that direct contact with kids. And so that's why things like this training are so important, and then all the training the officers go through is so important. In our text-to-tip program, we estimate that we've saved 27 lives from kids that are either thinking about suicide or getting ready to commit suicide. So, it's those kind of outreach programs, and those suggestions for those programs came from the kids themselves. So the fact that we've got students coming to the Board of Education, starting their own programs, they know what they need. And that's so important. And again, we need to be responsive to what they say they need. I want to really thank, again, all of our partners here. I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for the interest. And I want to say that I commend you for getting educated on this subject. And I hope that you take what you learned tonight and you share those with others. Thank you very much. And I want to introduce our County Commissioner, Laura Thomas.
Good evening. On behalf of the Douglas County Commissioners, I'd like to welcome you all here, and I'm joined tonight by Commissioner Diane Holbert. For those of you who know me well, know that I have been devoted to suicide prevention for many decades. So this journey for me, and you can tell that it's still very emotional for me. I started this several years ago, before I was a county commissioner, and before I even served as a Douglas County coroner. And when I served as the Douglas County coroner, I certainly saw the grief firsthand. Before that, I had researched homicide and suicide for the federal government for a project whose goal was to determine why are we losing so many people to homicide and to suicide. Because, there's that old saying, a problem well defined is half solved. And so the purpose of the program I worked on was to figure out what are the risk factors, what are leading to these suicide deaths. And after I started working on that project in 2004, I knew that we could make a difference. And that's part of the reason I stand before you today. So we are here tonight, though, to celebrate life, as well as the great collaborative spirit in Douglas County that results in our communities coming together on important issues, such as the one we are here to learn about tonight. On that note, please allow me to recognize and give thanks for the work of the Douglas County Youth Initiative and the Douglas County School District, whose efforts have led to tonight's event. We couldn't be happier to have Dr. Poland here with us this evening, and we're all looking forward to what you have to tell us, Doctor. And we know that he is a leading expert in suicide prevention and is here to not only provide us with a perspective on the issue, but also help us learn how to engage those who are in need of support. So again, thank you for all being here, and I'm going to turn this back over to Dr. Crawford. Stephanie.
Thank you, everyone. Well, thank you all again for partnering so that we could present Dr. Poland tonight. I just want to talk a little bit about this great man. He is a pioneer in school crisis and suicide prevention. So I've got a lot of nice things to say about you to start off. He has been the past president of the National Association of School Psychologists and the past prevention director of the American Association of Suicidology. Dr. Poland was also director of psychological services for a large school district that received numerous state and national awards for its exemplary psychological services. And I'm really proud that I got to work with him in that district. He's dedicated to prevention and has testified about the mental health needs of children before the U.S. Congress on 4 separate occasions. He is a founding member of the National Emergency Assistance Team, and he has personally assisted school communities following school shootings, acts of terrorism, natural disasters, and numerous suicide clusters. Dr. Poland is currently a professor of the College of Psychology and is co-director of the Suicide and Violence Prevention Office at Nova Southeastern University. So now, without any more time, let me please proudly allow me to introduce Dr. Scott Poland. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Stephanie, and indeed it's my pleasure pleasure being here tonight. More than anything, I hope to say
some things that will be helpful and meaningful to every single one of you. Your attendance tonight shows the young people in your community that you truly care about them. And by the way, for the young people that are here tonight, I have a simple question for you. Who's your go-to adult at school? Who's your go-to adult in the community? Who's your go-to adult at home? When students have that go-to adult and they step forward and get help if somebody's threatening suicide or homicide, so many tragedies in our country, frankly, should have been prevented. We're going to talk a lot about parenting, about the world today and how challenging it is. In all honesty, everything is pretty much accelerated. We're going to talk about the technology. And by the way, very simply, I believe the technology, it is a privilege. It is not a right. And parents do need to pay attention. By the way, do any of you remember growing up in a house where there was like one telephone and there was actually a cord on that phone? And for me, yes, it wasn't very long. When I was an adolescent, I swear to you, my mom sat next to that phone my entire adolescence. Was I ever on the phone in the middle of the night? Did I have a long 2 or 3 hour anguishing conversation with anyone? Not unless I wanted my mom to overhear it. And by the way, when I walked into the house, my home was a safe haven. Nobody could reach me. The only way you could reach me, you want to talk to my mom first because she's going to answer the phone. So the world has changed in many ways. And some of you, I know for example, Dan has a 14-year-old. Mark Twain had a quote about children and development. Here it is. When I was 7, I thought my parents knew everything. When they were 14, I knew that they knew nothing at all. When I was 21, I couldn't believe how much they'd learned in only 7 years. We have to stay involved in the lives of our teens. And traveling and responding, I'm sorry to tell you, to 16 different school shootings, including most recently Parkland. Often I would say something to the principal like, write a letter if it's going to be copied to every single one of your students. And the principal would say, well, what should be in the letter? Well, it needs to come from your heart. Let kids know they're going to have a chance to talk about it, write about it, music, artwork, projects, ceremonies, rituals, that we're all here for them. But perhaps most importantly, invite those students to write back to you as the principal to tell you what it is they need. And on one of those occasions, I went back, and literally the principal had like 2,000 letters sitting in her office. And I asked the most obvious question. What are they asking for? What do they need? Scott, in one way or another, every single kid said, I want more adults involved in my life. And I truly believe they do want us involved. So don't be the person that gets pushed out. And by the way, in today's world, it's not enough to know your kids' friends. You got to know the kids' friends' parents. You have to be the one that networks. By the way, how many of you are parents of adolescents? Would you mind raising your hands? I am so sorry. Of course, I don't really mean that. But not long ago, I got to talk to some 6th graders' parents. They're excited. Their kids are entering middle school. And I made several of the points I've already made tonight. I almost, before I was done, wanted to say, stand up and repeat after me. I am the parent. My happiness does not depend on whether or not my 11-year-old likes me right now. I did not go that far. But the principal called me the next day. He said, the 6th grade parents love what you had to say. They want you to come back to the school. Well, why would I come back? They want you to tell their children why they're going to change a few things. So it's a little bit like they missed some of the point. So let's look at a couple of key things here. Yes, it is a very challenging time. It is the screen age. And I think we might have skipped one slide. Let's go back to see if we can get, we have a slide that has a lot of statistics on it. If I can get it to load for me. Well, I know all those statistics. Here's the bottom line. Suicide is the 2nd leading cause of death for teenagers in America. In some states, and I just did a webinar for the state of Montana yesterday, suicide is the leading cause of death for a kid in Montana. More young people die from suicide than virtually every disease put together. Now, somehow I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person here tonight that had their life affected by a suicide. For me, that was my father. I was 25. I was a good example of somebody that never thought it could happen in my family. If you lost a relative, you lost a child, you lost a best friend, I have some idea of what you've gone through. But we need to focus on prevention. There's so much we can do. I was really delighted to see the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention represented outside and many other prevention organizations. The bottom line is we have to talk about suicide more. Let me quote our Surgeon General. 45,000 suicides a year in this country. We got to talk about it more at our homes, our schools, and in our churches. And let me talk about school violence for a moment. I was a responder at Parkland. They called me immediately. I was in the superintendent's key meetings and planning. And here's what I hope you will carry with you tonight. Schools are the safest places children go. I think you probably know that the vast majority of children in America, they get murdered away from school. Now, one violent death on a school campus in America is unacceptable, and we have to work on safety there and prevention and safety everywhere. And unfortunately, the media has given us the impression that a school shooting is likely to happen anywhere, anytime. Part of it is their definition is often wrong in terms of what actually is a school shooting. School shooting is a possibility. It is not a probability. And in our schools, we need to be careful not to do things that make kids feel unsafe in perhaps the safest place they could possibly be. And I believe the wisest decisions, they're always made by a group of people. And input from students is absolutely critical. I like to say school safety is an inside job. How do we get a commitment from the students first? How do we make sure they understand if somebody is threatening violence, somebody is threatening suicide, somebody has a weapon, that they get an adult involved immediately. And then we need the input from the entire faculty and the entire community. So now let's talk a little bit about technology, and we'll come back and talk about suicide some more. We'll talk about bullying prevention more. But estimates are that perhaps our young people spend 6.5 or even more hours a day on all that technology. And I get asked questions like these. Well, my third grader wants an iPhone. What do you think? I'm not sure I really want her to have an iPhone with 24-hour internet access. Let me think about that, Mom. When did I first get a phone with internet access? I think I was 56 years old. Why does your daughter need this right now? Well, all of her friends have one. Then there was, oh, well, I have twin boys. They're 10 years old, and I try to watch where they go on the internet. However, when I put their younger sister to bed, I think they visit all those sites I don't want them to visit. Well, should I block those sites? That's a pretty easy question to answer. I'm here today to say, I love the desktop. The desktop sits on the kitchen counter. You ever walk into the room and all of a sudden the screen gets turned away from you? Ever aware that the history trail just got erased? We need to have a conversation about this. If you have a 12-year-old daughter and you're thinking about getting her a laptop that has a camera in it, what do you think I'm going to say to you? I could give you so many examples where she finally relented. She sent pictures she never should have sent. They were all over school, and it was a very difficult thing to ever live down. So part of the message initially is take charge of that technology. So let's talk about bullying and cyberbullying for a moment. Sometimes what I hear from a school administrator is, it was cyberbullying, it happened over the weekend, it did not happen on school grounds, so therefore it's not really our responsibility. but it impacts learning. Because it impacts learning, we must get involved and get to the bottom of what's going on. School counselors will say to me, at the middle school level on Monday morning, there's a lot of drama because of all the things that were posted over the weekend. And I grant you it's a slippery slope for school administrators, but we've got to get involved and take reasonable actions to try to stop it. And perhaps the saddest thing for a kid, when they get bullied enough, you know what they start to think? They start to think they deserve it. No kid deserves this. All the adults need to say, we are going to get this stopped. We are here for you every step of the way. You are not bringing this upon yourself. Now, what do teachers sometimes say? I'm only one person. Yes, I know there was bullying going on over there in the hallway. I'm one person. I have a few minutes. How do I make it a teachable moment for the bystanders? And by the way, many of us like terms upstander or witness. The term bystander is pretty passive. Upstander or witness implies you're at least supposed to say something. Maybe you can't stop the bullying, but you document it to people who can get involved. So support for the victim, consequences for the bully, and make sure it's a teachable moment for all of the students who are standing idly by. Here's one of my favorite quotes. It'll be a theme throughout tonight. But if I work in a school and I know there's bullying going on and I just hustle on past, what message did I just give the students by my inaction? By the way, if I drink and drive, if I drive and I text with my cell phone, what message do I give all 4 of our children and now grandchildren? The quote was, what we do speaks so loudly to our children that when we actually try to talk to them, they cannot hear us. So next Tuesday, I'm doing yet another presentation for Parkland parents, and there's a little acronym, TALK. T is for talk. A is for continual assessment of how your kid's doing and the aftermath of this staggering tragedy. The L is for listening, which is critically important. And the K is for always being kind and being compassionate about what your children have experienced. Going back to communities that have experienced staggering tragedies, sometimes I hear this statement. Even the people closest to me, they say, you should be over this by now. I'm tired of hearing you talk about this. What should we be saying? I'm here for you every step of the way. Whenever you want to talk about this, I am here to listen. And I'd like to use our son for a quick example. By the way, he loved basketball. Most important point is he picked basketball, not something that we were picking for him. But I can still hear him dribbling the 2 balls in the kitchen. We had a little goal inside. We had a goal outside. We put lights on out there. So anytime, no matter how tired I was, if Jeremy would say, Dad, will you rebound? I'd get up off the couch. I'd go out there. I am not saying a word. Jeremy is incredibly relaxed. He's shooting something he enjoys. All I do is catch the ball, nice chest pass back. Pretty soon you're talking to me, telling me all these things I want to know about because I'm his dad. And I would respond with something incredibly insightful based on years of graduate psychology study when I would say, wow, I'm not sure. What are you thinking, son? That's a hard one. You don't want your parents to say, do this, do that, you won't have a problem. You just want to be listened to. The words are respond, don't react. Reach out, don't preach. I was a lucky guy that talked to 3,500 Columbine parents here 2 nights after that tragedy. That was the prevailing message. Find the shared time when your kid will truly talk to you. That might be riding in a car, that might be baking a cake, that might be going out to dinner. And by the way, technology. So many little kids, they're in the restaurant. What's the first thing mom and dad do? Hand them the technology. Let's put some reasonable limits on that. Now, I gave a presentation in Utah. I actually got to talk to all 3,000 staff members about prevention for 3 hours. And I made this statement: don't let technology steal your students and your children. A guy jumps up. They've already been stolen. Okay, I'm suggesting we have to start early and be very careful with developmental issues, and there should be more and more technology access as they get older. But you're sitting here, some of you have high school kids. They're already used to a certain amount of technology. What about sitting around the kitchen table? Let's talk about technology usage for our family. You know what a lot of moms say to me? It's my husband. I would like to have a technology-free meal. He will not turn off his devices. So he could model turning off his devices. I tried to reach one of my good friends. I got no response for like 24 hours. He said, we decided as a family to have 24 hours that would be technology-free. Some schools around the country, the students are voluntarily saying, let's have a blackout day where we will not be on our screens all day. And by the way, those screens, they're interfering with sleep. So here's my recommendation. First of all, I'm going to be honest. High school kids are chronically sleep deprived. The bottom line is we start high school way too early in this country. I was in a high school in Orlando last spring. The bell rang at 5 minutes after 7. Do you have any idea what time you have to get up to actually ride a bus and be in school at 5 after 7? We had 3 daughters. All I can tell you is they did not roll out of bed, grab a granola bar, and head for a bus. There was an entire process that took a while. So just be aware, sleep deprivation is connected to depression and suicide. So I made this statement for parents in Alabama last week. Tell your children it's bedtime. Hand me all of your devices. They will be charged and they will be ready for you in the morning. A mom stayed behind to talk to me. What if my 13-year-old daughter's friends needed to talk to her in the middle of the night? They would not be able to reach her. What's wrong with your daughter's friend like talking to their own parents? Something is so upsetting in the middle of the night. And if you have your daughter's phone, well, you could choose to answer it at 3 a.m. if you want to. You know, I did not convince her. She walked away believing her daughter needed to be available 24/7. I totally disagree. The screens should not be under the pillows because they're going to buzz. They're going to wake your kids up, and it's going to interfere with their sleep cycle. Though now, and so, okay. Take a look at this slide. Common Sense Media. Raise your hand. Have you ever heard of Common Sense Media? Okay. Wonderful. Worldwide resource. Do you want to know whether the video game's appropriate for your kid's age? You want to know about the movie? You want to know about the latest Netflix program? By the way, how many of you saw 13 Reasons Why? Just a quick show of hands. Okay. Please know I did 3 webinars on the dangers of that program. I could go on for the next few hours. But let me just quickly say, pretty much everything was totally wrong. Suicide is not about revenge. And the good news, thankfully the vast majority of kids that are bullied do not attempt or die by suicide. But perhaps the thing that bothered me the most about the program was the adults at school and at home were portrayed as clueless, absent, uncaring, or a few of them downright mean. You remember how they portrayed the counselor, Mr. Porter? And we're trying to help kids see the counselor as a wonderful person who truly cares about them. Now, some parents are rather naive. They say, oh, my kid couldn't have watched that. We don't have Netflix. Everybody watches it on somebody else's account. So what did Common Sense Media say about 13 Reasons Why? Nobody under 16, period. And if you're over 16 and you've had a problem with anxiety and depression, you shouldn't watch it then. I stand by their recommendation. But I think the most important point on this slide is the bottom one. If parents would actually pay attention, kids would actually change their screen usage. Let's move on again. Okay, there's the number of hours, young children. We've talked about that. We've talked about the excessive screen time. By the way, research is saying not only does it interfere with sleep, it interferes with exercise, and it interferes with real face-to-face interpersonal relationships. So there are lots of dangers with our current screen time. There was actually a really interesting article that said the CEOs of all the big technology companies, they don't let their kids go crazy with all the technology. They realize some of the dangers that are associated with it. Okay, now let's talk about cars. And I'm going to talk about car accidents for a moment. So let me tell you, the leading cause of death for a kid in America, it's an accident. If they're elementary age, it was a bicycle accident or they drowned. If they're high school age, it was probably a car accident. Number 2 is suicide. Number 3 is homicide. By the way, you could buy a bulletproof backpack for your kid to wear to school. Here was my New York Times quote. Where does the kid actually need to wear the bulletproof backpack? It's not at school. It's actually at home and in the community. That's tragically where most kids get murdered. And we're going to have to face that and do some changes in our society. Everytown, USA, 2,700 kids in America died a gun death last year. Now, in the West, I try to be very careful with what I say, so here it is. I'm not here to question your adult right to own a gun. I'm simply going to say, with that right comes a responsibility to safeguard that gun from a troubled, impulsive, substance-abusing, mentally ill, impulsive person that might reside in your very own home. So ironically, last week, I had lunch with 3 school superintendents in Huntsville, Alabama. One of the things they said was, we need to hold adults accountable. It's their gun. Hold them accountable if their kid gets access to it and somebody is injured or killed. So they called yesterday. A 7-year-old boy took the loaded handgun from his house, took it to school, and he shot himself. Thankfully, it's a minor injury. They want to hold the parents accountable. But the reality is, that's not what our laws say, that's not what our prosecutors do, but I very much believe that we need to recognize the responsibility. Means matter. At the website at Harvard, because I sometimes hear this from a parent. Well, I mean, if she's determined to kill herself, she's just going to find another way. It wouldn't matter that I locked up the gun, changed the code, etc. Well, let's look at the research all around the world. It's pretty straightforward. You remove the gun, you raise the barrier on the bridge, suicides go down. It's that simple. Unfortunately, very few people ever survive if they attempt with the gun. So, responsibility is the question. Oh, I started to talk about car accidents, and I have a slide about that in just a moment. But I believe strongly in telling kids the truth in developmentally appropriate language. And really there's a bit of a technique to this where you tell them the truth about something, then you wait and see what question they are going to ask you. For example, if your kid asked you a question about sex, would you tell them everything you know? No, you'd simply answer it. And there may be another question in 15 minutes. It may be 2 hours later. It might be 24 hours later. You simply answer their questions. Now, those are the typical reactions that children have to a tragedy. They regress academically, they regress behaviorally, they have nightmares, sleeping problems, and worries about the future. These are not the atypical reactions, these are the normal reactions. And parents need to respond with patience, structure, tolerance, love, and routine. So here's 2 examples to try to make this point. He's 8 years old, his dad was killed in an accident. Mom is saying, he wanted to sleep with me. I told him, no, you're 8 years old. His dad died. Let him sleep with you. He's not going to be there years from now. 15-year-old boy sadly found his 14-year-old sister dead in her room. Let's call him Tom. The next morning, Tom's parents are saying, he asked us for a nightlight last night. We told him absolutely not. Let him have a nightlight. Regression behaviorally is to be expected. Now I want to pick this up 5 weeks later. All of Tom's teachers are sitting around the conference table. Donna, Nancy, Lisa, and Laura are all sitting around the table, and one at a time they go, I can't understand this. Tom is failing all of his subjects. They're closing their grade book. They're going to go. I'm the one person saying, wait a minute. Don't you remember what happened to his sister 5 weeks ago? He found her dead. Regression academically is to be expected. Can't we do something besides fail him in every single class? Where's the compassion? Where's the follow-up? Let me be honest, the district where Stephanie and I worked, we had 110,000 students. We were always on to the next tragedy. And everybody is forgetting about the long-term follow-up. There's what's called the 60-20-20 rule. Here it is. 60% of us, regardless of how traumatic the event, we are going to be okay. Our family, our faith, our friends, our coping mechanisms. 20% minor problems. 20%, unfortunately, major problems. Now that I'm back in Colorado, anybody know the name Greg Barnes? Well, Greg Barnes was the Columbine star. And he hung himself on the first anniversary. He's an example of a kid that just didn't get enough help. Most of the assistance we provide to kids and families, it's short term. The good news, that works for about 60% of them. One of the messages I had for Superintendent Runcie is, I'm sorry to tell you that increased suicides have always followed school shootings. We need to increase the suicide prevention efforts in Broward County as well. Now, it seems to me that I might be skipping a few slides. So I have one that has information up about car accidents, which I'd like to zero in on for just a moment. Let me see if I can find it. Okay. No screens in cars or bedrooms. I talked about the bedrooms. Now let's talk about cars in just a moment. So here's the bottom line. That navigation feature is incredible, right? When was the last time you actually unfolded a map and tried to figure out how to go somewhere? But that navigation feature should be on the auditory mode. You ever ridden with somebody and like every few minutes they've got their screen up right in front of them? Okay. You know what teenagers say to me? Oh, what's the big deal? I mean, yeah, I text and I drive. I mean, I look up like every 5 to 10 seconds. It's a very dangerous thing. Here's the phrase, I wonder if you've ever heard it. Don't be intoxicated. It's all about modeling. We don't use the phone in the car. We wear our seat belts. We don't drink and drive. Approximately 3,000 kids die in a car accident every single year. When I say graduated driving laws, raise your hand if you know what that is. What's a graduated driving law? Okay. So the bottom line is graduated driving laws will save lives. 16-year-olds die 3 times more often in a car accident than 18-year-olds. It's all about inexperience. They're easily distracted when they have multiple kids in the car. They're inexperienced at driving after dark. And why do I feel so strongly about this? Going into classroom after classroom, putting the desks in a circle the day after their friend died in a car accident. Pay attention. Do not be in a hurry to put your kid behind the wheel. Our youngest, when she started driving, you want me to be honest, you know what I really missed? All of a sudden, Jill didn't need me so much. I was fond of saying, I don't care how far away your friend lives, Jill. Let's go get her and bring her back to our house. And on the way to pick up her friend, Jill and I would have free and easy conversation. On the way back to our house with her friend in the car, I was totally silent. I learned so much because of what I got to overhear. And by the way, McDonald's has the statement, full value meal. Where do you think I believe the full value meal really is? It's around your kitchen table. It's free and easy conversation between kids and parents. Somehow I doubt that I'm the only person here that experienced a divorce. For me, that was 6 times. All right, just kidding. I'm just trying to get a sense, are you really listening? Okay. It was only once. My ex-wife, you know what really helped? She is a psychologist. We made a pact. You don't talk badly about me to our children, and I will not talk badly about you. We never have. When Jill would come to me and say something negative about her mom, my ex-wife, do you think there were times I wanted to jump on and add to it? I never did, not a single time. You know what I always remembered? She's always going to be Jill's mother. She deserves my respect and certainly my financial support until Jill comes of age. I remarried 3 years later. And by the way, every milestone, every family event, and by the way, our son has 6 children. Would somebody please tell him to stop? But every birthday, every graduation, everybody's there. Everybody sits together. Everybody is nice. Isn't that what every single kid deserves? Some of you have to be aware that kids feel in the middle like every day with the impending divorce or the separation. In my work, I've had kids say, if I'd have been better in 2nd grade, I bet my daddy wouldn't have left us. And how do we help them understand it didn't have anything to do with you in 2nd grade? And how do we keep all parents involved in kids' lives? Whether it's 2 moms, 2 dads, whether it's mom and dad, how do we keep them all involved? And we have this responsibility to work together to take care of these children throughout our lives. And certainly it's easy for me to say, but how do we stop kids from feeling in the middle like every single day with all of these issues? Resiliency. Biggest word in all of psychology today. Tremendous research after 9/11/01. What is resiliency? It's the ability to bounce back from adversity. It's largely a learned behavior. And the keys to resiliency are the following. Surrounded by loving and caring family and friends. Being comfortable venting and sharing strong emotions. Being optimistic about the future. Having problem-solving skills. Now, I made the point earlier, I believe in telling kids the truth. Our son was 8 years old. Jeremy, I need to talk to you more about the death of your grandfather. He said, oh, I know what happened to him. He already told me he had a heart attack. That's true, son. He did have a heart attack, but there's more to the story. Now that you're 8, I hope you can understand what I'm about to say to you. And I want you to hear this from me, never from someone else. 2 weeks after his heart attack, your grandfather shot himself. The word is suicide. He ended his own life. He looked up to me and said, you lied to me. No, son, I didn't really lie. I was waiting to give you complete information. Then he thinks a while, and he says, oh, Dad, you shouldn't feel guilty. Oh, why is that? Well, your parents, they weren't both psychologists like mine are. They couldn't possibly have taught you everything I know about the importance of feeling good about yourself. I mean, everybody has problems. You just have to know to go to adults for help. Wasn't that sweet that he was trying to alleviate my guilt? What's the most important point? He's 8 years old. He believes he's a good person. Isn't that what you want for every single kid in the Douglas County School District? Just to believe I'm a good person. I wish I could give you magic dust so you could sprinkle it over their heads tomorrow in all those classrooms. One more point. Jeremy was like 3. He was still small enough to sit in the grocery cart. I'm like picking out the bananas, and I hear this little voice say, Dad, am I the boy you always wanted? Gave me the chance to enthusiastically say, yes, you're the boy I always wanted. You know what I want you to do tonight? Go home and tell your sons and daughters they're the ones you always wanted, and that you love them for the person they are today. When you show them that love every day, every single way, you've given them a tremendous advantage in this world. Don't love them for somebody they might become at some point. Love them for the kid they are today. So I hope you'll go home and tell them tonight how much you love them. They are the sons and daughters that you always wanted. All right, now I've got a question for you tonight. Can you think of the person in your life who gives you the benefit of their negativity like every time you see them? Can you visualize that person now? Here's your tip for tonight. Stay away from that person. Seek out people in your life that are positive and encouraging. Okay, moving on again. We've talked about the family meal and technology. We talked about networking. In all honesty, though, some kids in the teenage years are leading secret lives. They have to do with sex, drugs, and reckless behavior. You know what some kids have said to me? My parents never told me they didn't approve of premarital sex. Whatever your views are, you have to find that shared time. You have to talk to them. And very importantly, listen. And by the way, discussion about sexual matters, it's like not a one-time discussion, okay? But I remember when I first brought that up with Jeremy, I got him a nice meal. We're in the car, we're driving home. I mean, what's he gonna do, jump out? We're gonna have a discussion here about this. And it's very important for you to find that shared time and to truly know what's going on in your kid's life. Because sometimes parents are very, very astounded and upset about what's really happening. Now, I made a statement earlier that I believe virtually every tragedy, every youth suicide, every school shooting should have been prevented. We've got to get kids to go to adults for help. So it's interesting to look at the literature and to simply ask them, why didn't you go to an adult for help? So here's what they say. I did not want to get involved. I did not think it could happen. I feared retaliation. I have been conditioned not to tell. Let's see if you can finish this sentence. Unfortunately, I bet you can. Snitches get... That's a very pervasive thought. And by the way, if this gentleman right here got help for his elderly neighbor who was suicidal, would we like call him a snitch? We call him a good, responsible person. And that's really the message we need to get across to all kids. And getting referred, kids with behavior problems, all those years working in a school, and let's call him Tom. Teachers give me a long litany of everything Tom's doing wrong. When it was appropriate, I'd say, do you know what Tom wants to be when he grows up? Does he have a pet at home? What's he do with his free time? Most of the time, the answer from the teacher was, I have no idea. You've got to know about his hopes and dreams. By the way, 3rd grade state accountability test, Do I think a third grader actually cares about that test score? No. You know what they care about? Pleasing their teacher. But the teacher has to invest in their hopes and their dreams. Our youngest went to a high school of 4,000. The teachers couldn't even keep her name straight. I grew up in a small town in Kansas. There were 82 kids in my class. You know what that meant for me? Scott, you want to play football? You bet. Here is your uniform. You want to march in the band at halftime? Do that too. You want to part in the play? It's yours. We've got to have kids involved in extracurricular activities. Let me summarize the most comprehensive study of adolescence in our history from NIMH. School connection is the key to everything for an adolescent. We've got to have them involved in something. I don't care if it's chess, robotics, drama, football, whatever it is, we have to find something that they will get involved in. And perhaps the last reason that bothers me the most about why kids don't come forward, they'll say, I'm sorry, I don't have an adult I trust. We have to change that. And by the way, Colorado has Safe to Tell. I know the executive director, Susan Wheeler. What are most of the calls for Safe to Tell about? Kids call about bullying, suicide, and possible violence. Your kids all need to know the number for Safe to Tell. And Safe to Tell sends out the police for wellness checks. All right, there's my slide about cars. Don't be intoxicated. The irony, you got the kid the phone for safety, but in the car, it represents a very real danger. The technology, there are so many ways that parents could actually use it. You could measure every keystroke. You could set the phone so that it will not work in a moving car. You can set it so that it will not work during study hours during the week. And I do believe that the technology personnel for the Douglas County School District would be wonderful in helping you keep up with what are the latest technology things. There's a new one out. It's called this secret computer. So the parent thinks it's a computer, right? Or it's actually, I'm sorry, it's a secret calculator. So the parents think it's only a calculator. It's an app on their phone. But they can take the apps that you don't want them to have and place them inside secret calculator. So it's a challenge. And the bottom line is, when your kid is your technology guru, we're already behind. Because in all honesty, they're probably not telling you everything about the technology, how it's being used, and all of the particular apps that they are on. All right, there is that quote about the modeling we do is incredibly important. How do you treat your partner? How do you treat your neighbor? You go to school for a conference. How do you treat the school staff members? And by the way, working in a school full-time for 26 years, you know what I think about school personnel? They're pretty incredible people. They did not get into education to make a lot of money. They actually care about your children. And if one of them tells you there's a problem, don't be defensive. Work with them and follow their recommendations. Okay, restitution. Jeremy was about 3 years old. We always believed in timeout, never in physical punishment. So he is shaking a floor lamp, which is a dangerous behavior. He is sent to his room. He doesn't want to go to his room. That's why it actually works. As he's walking towards his room, I see him throw open the door, and the doorknob goes through the drywall. Am I angry? Do I want to yell at him? Of course I want to do that. I go to the other end of the house. When I come back, I'm calm. I have a simple question. Jeremy, how are you going to fix the hole you put in the wall? He's 3 years old. He has no idea. He starts crying. Jeremy, get your piggy bank. Come with me now. We drive to Ace Hardware. He buys the materials. We go home, and I make him help patch up the hole in the wall. Recently, The principal just restitution. By the way, if somebody backs into your car tonight in the parking lot, are you going to get out and scream at them? Hopefully you're going to get out and ask for the insurance information. Kids need to learn to do whatever they can developmentally to make it right, to apologize, to make restitution. So a school I was consulting with, the principal said, the kid was so mad at me, when he walked out, he slammed my office door with all of his might, cracking the door for him. Now he's a special education student, so we're having a big conference. And we simply ask, how are you going to pay the $175 for the door frame? The kid doesn't know. He has no money. The parents say they have no money. Well, fine. We anticipated that. And let's call him Tom. Tom will be staying after school every day for X number of days. Basically, he will help our custodian. He will ride the late bus home. And therefore, he will pay off his debt working X number of days. But Tom doesn't stay behind a single day. And a week later, the principal calls and says, I got a check in the mail. They turned it in on their homeowner's policy. Is that what we wanted? We just wanted him to be held responsible. They must be held responsible at a very early age. Now, there's two ends of the spectrum here with kids. Most recently, Donna was the principal of University School on our campus. University School is a pretty special place. It's actually amazing what you can get if you can spend $25,000 a year for your kids' education. If it was up to me, we'd spend that amount of money on every single kid in America, not just the kids who have really wealthy parents. The last time I went over there, there was a little coffee. The mom comes up to me and says, you know, I have 5 kids here. I mean, I just did the math. That's a lot of money after taxes just for your kids' private education. So what did they get? They got small classes, a teacher's aide in every class. They had every extracurricular activity you could possibly think of: crew, lacrosse, fencing, ice hockey in South Florida. So Donna asked me to go to lunch with the dad. The dad said, I'm having really big problems with my kid, and I'd like your husband to go to lunch with me. He heard me speak at a school event. And Donna says, you know, he's probably the richest man you're ever going to meet, Scott. In fact, he buys and sells corporations. His yacht is one of the 20 largest in the entire world. She actually had pointed the yacht out to me on the Intercoastal in Fort Lauderdale. So we go to lunch. Here's what he says pretty quickly. I figured out what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy the best life coach money can buy to work with my kid. I thought to myself, I could be a life coach. Aren't we all life coaches? Now, if you've been listening tonight, and I appreciate your rapt attention, you probably figured out what I said to him. Be his dad now. Don't hire somebody. Be his dad now. Buy a few less companies. Take him to a board meeting. In a year and a half, it sounds like he's going out of state to college. Be involved now. But what really made me think of University School, and I'm going to be honest, kids that are in high socioeconomic schools, they have so many activities, the activities cause them stress. Because the club team interferes with the school team. The community play interferes with the school play. The community dance, the school dance. I like to say this. How about one activity a season? Don't you want your kids' life to revolve around your family? Tell them one activity a season. And I'm a big believer in extracurricular activities. I just don't want there to be so many it causes stress. Also, another thought for you. Please don't set up your adolescent's room to be a little kingdom. They have their television, their phone, their music, their movies. Why are they coming out of that room? She made dinner, but watch your kid try to pick up that plate of food and go eat it in isolation. All right, moving on to a couple more key points, okay? Parental figures, they may be a single mom, a single dad, two moms, two dads, mom and dad. It's all about everybody staying involved. And I really want to thank all the dads that are here tonight, because that gives your kids a very powerful message. Father's involvement is connected to better achievement at school and happiness. And whatever it is between the adults and a kid's life, they need to work it out. They need to say whatever it is to each other, or they need to turn to their friends. But don't continually make your kid the messenger. And also, I'd be remiss tonight not to talk about grandparents. Grandparents are raising many children, and they're doing yeoman's work in helping those children. Okay, now I'm going to get to a couple more things, and I'm going to try to go very quickly. There's the national data for high school students and suicidal thoughts, plans, and actions. If we just zero in on the bottom phrase, 7.4% of high school students made one or more attempts in the last 12 months. The data for Colorado, and I just looked it up, it's 7.2, so it's very much in line. Well, let me put this in numbers you can understand. 1,000 kids in a Douglas County high school, what's the best estimate we have? 72 of them made a suicide attempt in the last 12 months. You know what's really scary? You don't know who they are. Their teachers don't know. Parents don't know. School counselor doesn't know. So who knows all about their suicidal behavior? That would be their friends. That's why I'm delighted to know that Douglas County has many suicide prevention initiatives. Now, there's some sad figures about bullying. I don't think I need to belabor these points. It tends to peak in middle school. We have to realize this is a very significant problem and take the kind of action that I described early on. By the way, it has to be a school-wide approach. It's not like one teacher can solve the bullying problem. And unfortunately, cyberbullying is a perfect form for what is called relational bullying. Sometimes I'll hear, oh, one thing was posted online. That doesn't meet the definition of repetitive. Okay, I grant you it was nasty, but it was only one posting. Wait a minute. 72 kids posted they agreed with the nasty, humiliating comments. Therefore, it does meet that definition. Wow, we skipped again. Here we go. So let me talk about children and depression. The good news, suicide is incredibly rare at the elementary level, but more and more upper elementary school students are making suicidal statements. Elementary staff always say, do we have to take it seriously every single time? Yes, you do. The most dramatic rise in suicide in America has been the rate for middle school age girls. And by the way, 13 Reasons Why did not help. A bigger problem for high school kids than for middle schoolers. So here's statements I get from parents. Well, how do I know she's really depressed? I mean, aren't all teenagers moody, irritable? I think she's withdrawing. I think she's preparing me for the fact that she's going away to school in California next year. Mom and Dad, let me ask you a few questions. Is this pervasive? Is this affecting all aspects of her life? School, home, peers? Yes. Is it persistent? Has it gone on for 2 or 3 weeks or more? Yes, it has. Has she dropped out of what was previously a pleasureful activity? Yes, as a matter of fact, she was on the dance team for years. I couldn't believe it this year when she said she didn't care about it anymore. You have a depressed teenager. 20% of all teenagers suffer from depression at some point during those tumultuous years. Here's the bottom line, and I'm sorry to tell you this. About 80% of depressed teenagers never receive any treatment whatsoever. My batting average, and it's baseball season, the Rockies aren't doing so well, right? Okay. So I tried to look back the times that I recommended outside counseling for parents, how many of them would actually follow through despite my hopefully most persuasive recommendation. I'd say maybe about 1 every 5 followed through. How do we convince parents? There's evidence-based treatment. You know what many of us would say, and I'm going to be very direct about this. Why is the suicide rate increased so dramatically for young people? Part of it was the black box warning on antidepressants. That made so many parents say, no drugs for my kids. We're talking about a prescribed medication after a careful diagnosis, of course. Something that should be monitored very carefully every week for a minimum of 6 weeks. But let me be honest, I've seen antidepressants in combination with our typical talk therapy help so many kids. I'm getting a key here that I know I get to go a little longer. Okay. So I've got to get to a few more points that I think are really important. And by the way, kids cannot just snap out of being depressed. Remember the pervasive, persistent dropping out of what were previously pleasureful activities. Now, let's imagine the kid was hospitalized because they were suicidal. Now they're out. What's probably the last thing in the world the parent wants to bring up with their kid? Don't we want to view it as, oh, thank God that's over? The smart parent would be, have you ever had those thoughts again? It wouldn't be unusual to have those thoughts. Still have the safety plan. Still know the National Crisis Helpline. Very important that they know we're always there for them. And it would not be unusual to have those thoughts again. Now as I move to several critical things I want to go over before I finish. Here they are. These come from the World Health Organization. They're really pretty straightforward. Good relationship with other young people. But I got a question for you. A disturbed kid in Douglas County, who do they probably go to for help? I'm going to argue they go to another kid with a lot of problems. Between 2 or 3 of them, they don't know enough to get one of you involved. The rest of those are pretty straightforward. Taking away the lethal means, mental health care, religion, very, very protective. The church, the synagogue, the mosque, a place to belong. Douglas County has a tremendous emphasis on wellness for students, which is a critical part of education today. More protective factors, and I've tried to demonstrate pretty much every single one of those. Although I want to be honest and say a lot of kids are experiencing academic pressure. Not that many years ago, you wanted to get into the flagship state university and you graduated from high school, you were in. Today, sometimes you have to be really an incredibly good student. With our youngest, who was very successful in high school, I couldn't bring myself to say, Jill, I'm sorry you won't be going to the University of Texas like you dreamed because you got 1B in an AP class. Unfortunately, that's reality. You know what I like to share with kids? I actually got kicked out of college the first time. All I can tell you is it was for poor scholarship and I would have been a very bad accountant. Maybe it worked out. I got 3 degrees, I wrote 5 books. You can recover. It's okay to stay home, take a year off, go to a community college. All those things are okay. You can still get a good job and a good career. Okay, we talked about developmental levels. I don't think I have to belabor that. The phrase is up there, reach out, don't preach. Find the shared time when your kid will talk to you. I talked about resiliency earlier, but I want to make sure that you see those points. And some of you are taking pictures of the slides. I'm sure we can post them somewhere where they will be accessible to you. Absolutely, we want you to have them. So, Carnegie Foundation. So they weighed in and said, what do kids in the United States need to be successful? So, 3 or more significant adults in their lives. Although most of us have decided 3 significant adults besides parents, that's way too ambitious. Let's try for 1. Let's imagine that she's singing a solo at church this Sunday. Who's going to show up? Is a retired person across the street going to go? Is one of her teachers going to show up? Is her soccer coach going to show up? Let's imagine he has his final soccer game of the year. Who is going to show up? Is somebody going to drive in from Colorado Springs, an aunt or a family friend? Just to show you are important to me. A sense of safety, security, and belonging in our home, our schools, and our neighborhood. Pretty straightforward. Now let's talk about organized activities. I made a point a few minutes ago that the students in really high socioeconomic families, in my opinion, there's too many activities. They cause stress. By the way, raise your hand right now if you know a young man or young woman you're absolutely convinced they will make their living playing a professional sport. Even if you had raised your hand, 1 knee injury, and they're not going to make it to the WNBA. You know what I think sports should all be about? Participation, being a part of something. Okay. Now, so let's call him Leroy. Leroy was 8 years old. Leroy was a student at Millsap Elementary School, where I went for 24 straight years. I didn't send an intern. I provided their psychological services. So Leroy got weekly counseling. One day Leroy says, you know what I want to do more than anything, Dr. Poland? I just want to play Little League Baseball. Well, great, Leroy. I saw the forms in the office. Let's go get it and sign you up. Oh, you don't understand. My mom, and it's just my mom, she has $75. She doesn't have the $75. And she works nights. I could never get to a practice. That's a reality for a lot of kids in America. They don't have the money. They don't have the transportation. Now, I signed up to coach soccer when Jeremy was 5 years old. Do I know anything about soccer? No, I didn't. But you know what my goal was as a psychologist? This needs to be fun. This needs to be something these boys want to do. And there was a kid on my roster. His name was Bobby Bryan. Bobby Bryan doesn't come to the first practice. So I had his phone number and I call up. I get him on the phone, then I get his mom on the phone. Claire says, take him off the list. My husband left us, moved back to Chicago. I work after school. He could never get to a practice. Well, where is he after school, Claire? He's in a daycare. Well, if you give me written permission, I could easily pick him up. I'll take him to practice, and I will bring him to your house only after I know that you're home for work. Do you know that I actually drove Bobby Bryan to practice? Well, except when he turned 16, we were still playing, and he drove his own car. And Bobby Bryan and I are friends on Facebook. He just had his second baby. Okay? We've got to step forward. And by the way, I just heard from Rodney yesterday. Rodney was my little brother in the Big Brothers program in Muncie, Indiana. Rodney was 13 when we were matched. Rodney turns 58 next month. Want me to be honest? Rodney never had anybody. His mom was on welfare. He never knew his dad. Do you know that the waiting list to get a big brother in virtually every city in America is 4 years? You're 9 years old when you go down and get signed up and they don't call you until you're 13. All of a sudden you don't care about it anymore. The waiting list to get a big sister is only about 4 months. That says a lot about the differences between men and women and stepping forward. And when our youngest graduated from school, moved back to Houston, what are we proud to tell you? She signed up to be a big sister to Anna, who's 12 years old. We've got to get involved in kids' lives. There's how to contact me. I'm fond of saying I respond to every email I receive. There's the website for the Suicide and Violence Prevention Office. We have a lot of materials there, and it's been my great pleasure to talk to you. Now, I understand there might be some questions, and I'll be happy to respond to written questions or take questions from the audience. Any really hard questions, Stephanie, you'll answer those,
Sure,
right?
I will.
Okay.
Would you like me to read them
Sure.
for you?
Sure.
Okay.
That way I won't have to get out my glasses.
There we go. Okay, so these are some really great questions that I can tell come from our students, so thank you. And before I read these questions, I do want to tell you that if you're a high school student that came, you do get your community service hours for attending. And Marsha Alston is in the back with the Douglas County Youth Initiative. And please see her and make sure that she has your name and email so that you can get your certificate of attendance. And thank you, Marsha, for partnering with us to do this tonight. Okay, so the first question for you is, can you address the difference, if there is one, between joking among friends and when it may be that they've crossed the line to being inappropriate or bullying?
All right, thank you very much. The bottom line is, sometimes as adults, we don't think it's bullying. In all honesty, we can't make that assessment without talking to the student. They're going to tell us how they received that information. Their perception is everything. I always get this, how do we know it's not good-natured teasing? Well, it's all about how was that situation perceived? Who had all the power? If kids are teasing each other and they walk away at about the same level, okay. But if they walk away with one kid up here and one kid down here, then that is bullying. And sometimes I hear, oh, come on, Scott, bullying's a part of life. Everybody gets bullied. Do you know that we can accept that that would be a natural thing occurring for every kid? And we do know that bullying does take its toll. And if you were severely bullied, it could affect you for as long as a decade after school. We also know there's a relationship between bullying and suicide. It is not a causal relationship. It's a strong association. At the foundation of suicide for a young person is untreated or undertreated mental illness, often in combination with adverse childhood experiences. So what are those adverse childhood experiences? They're all the things we don't want a kid to actually have to suffer through. Living in poverty, living with a mentally ill or a substance abusing family member, being rejected by a natural parent, and being physically, emotionally, or sexually abused. That's at the foundation. Adverse childhood experiences and untreated or undertreated mental illness. And none of the research is ever going to say bullying clearly causes suicide, but it is very much associated. And there's a simple point that I need to make. When you know a kid is the victim of bullying, you should not hesitate to ask them questions about hopelessness, giving up, and yes, thoughts of suicide.
Okay, this next question is, what's the best way to help someone who's thinking of committing suicide if they are your friend? Do you become invasive and overbearing, or do you stay distant and let your connection and compassion help the situation?
Okay, very great question. One time I had a kid basically raise her hand, a high school kid, and said, I did everything you said. As soon as I knew my friend was suicidal, I immediately went to the school counselor. He made me feel like I was some kind of a snitch. That was very unfortunate. And that is a rare occurrence for a counselor to respond that way. We need to basically be complimenting you and thank you for coming forward and getting adult help for your friend. They might be angry at you for a while, but ultimately they will understand that you had their best interest at heart. So the bottom line is stay with your friend, get them to an adult for help, pick up the phone, call the National Crisis Helpline, 1-800-SUICIDE, or does everybody know if I were to pull out my iPhone and push the button and I said to Siri, I want to kill myself? Do you know what happens? She responds with, may I connect you to the National Crisis Helpline. The resources for kids are in their phone. There's a National Crisis text line. You text home, help, start, anything to 741-741, and a trained person is texting you back. Now, being old school, obviously, I'd like to talk to you face to face, or if I can't talk to you face to face, I'd like to have you on the other end of the phone. But we have a totally new generation of young people. So use that texting to make sure they know all I have to do is contact the National Crisis Text Line. Nancy Lubin founded it. They get more than 20 million crisis texts a year.
All right. And what is your advice on a plan of action if you find evidence that your teen has possible plans to commit suicide? How do you confront them?
Okay. Well, the other thing, here's a point I'd like to make tonight. I like the term died by suicide. I've not used the word committed with our subject matter tonight. When you use the word committed to somebody like me who lost a loved one, I might respond by saying, you commit a crime, you commit a burglary. So let's all try to use the term died by. And that basically seems to imply they traveled a very long road. It was everything, everyone, yet it was no one's fault. So any evidence that you believe your child is planning to die by suicide, you've got to increase supervision. You've got to remove any lethal means from the house. Turn to the school for help. Ask them for a referral. Maybe you're already familiar with mental health resources in the community, but you might not be. So contact the school and ask for referral. Take immediate action. The bottom line is, and this is hard, especially without training, but here are the three critical questions. Are you thinking about it now? Have you ever attempted before? Tell me, how would you end your life? Can you see how critical those questions are in terms of, they might say, well, I'd wish to be dead, but I wish I could go to sleep and never wake up. But no, I've never attempted. No, I don't have any plan. Well, I would be making an appointment with mental health. But what if they told me, yes, I've attempted before, I'm thinking about it now, and here's how I'm going to do it. Now we're talking emergency room. So those questions are critical in terms of determining how fast we need to act to get them to mental health treatment.
Okay, and does anyone in the audience have any other questions? And I'll come by the microphone.
Oh, hi, my name is Malcolm. I'm a senior over in high school in Cherry Creek. My question is kind of like, I guess like a hypothetical. I guess like for me, like throughout my life, I've seen like people around me who have had suicidal like thoughts or experiences in their minds have kind of different backgrounds. Like maybe you have absent parents or like drug abuse or parents or like things like that. I feel like when I see I'm trying to reach out to adults in their life, it doesn't always end well. So I feel like what's like realistically the option for people that don't have like adults that are not in their life that they can reach out to, because I can see that from people that in my life, that's not always an option for them to go through. And just after that, they have people around them. So that's my question is like, what can they do around that?
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for being here tonight. You mentioned several really important things about a go-to adult. You've acknowledged that virtually all teens have suicidal friends. In fact, in all honesty, teenagers are often looking to the adults like, why aren't you talking to us about this? We have friends that talk about it. We have friends who've attempted. Sadly, a lot of teenagers know somebody who died by suicide. We have to have these conversations with them. And when young people live in a situation where there's a lot of adverse experiences, it's especially challenging because that's not going to be something that's going to change very easily. But we want to be there as a good friend, always there to listen, making sure they know all of the state and national resources. Anytime you want to talk, I'm here. And I wish I could tell you there were magic words. The magic words are just what I said. I care. I'm here. And how can I help you get through this? So, critically important, I'll repeat something I said earlier. We have to talk about suicide more. Many people believe we shouldn't bring this up. We bring this up, then kids are going to think about it for the very first time. You know, I had a slide up and I went through it rather quickly, but let's look at the best data we have from the federal government. Nearly 1/3 of high school kids said they felt sad or hopeless for 2 or 3 weeks or more. This is a major problem in our country, and we need more awareness, more resources. I was delighted to hear your superintendent say he wants more counselors. He needs more funding. The mental health services, schools are the ideal place to deliver those services. And right now, and I touched a little bit on school violence and school shootings, but in all honesty, where's all the money going? It's going into fencing, hardware, metal detectors, more policemen, more cameras. Please don't think I'm opposed to all those things, but where are the mental health resources? We actually spot troubled children very early. And a real sign of a troubled child, a kid who never shows remorse, a kid who's fascinated with guns, violence, bombs, a kid who's cruel to animals, a kid who sets fires. We spot those kids early. The most important thing is, where are the intervention? Working in schools for 26 years, the older a kid got, the harder it was to try to change something and get the resources and turn it around. So early intervention, and the school should really be the hub of where kids get mental health services. It should be very commonplace for all of us. There's also a national recommendation that says every adult in this country should be screened for depression every time they see their physician. How many of you feel like that's happening? Okay, only a couple of you, and that's wonderful. So those are physicians paying attention. One other point that I have to make tonight is this simple. Approximately 70% of the people who died by suicide went to see the family doctor shortly before they ended their life. That's true from adolescents all the way through the elderly. They were in the doctor's office. That was a logical place for there to be conversation, to ask them about hopelessness, to ask about the strange injury that they might be having. So we need physicians that step forward. Where I work, thankfully, we get to train medical school students. So I'm hoping the next generation of medical students will be more comfortable. And Suicide Prevention Week was last week. I was astounded. I was invited in the evening to medical school, 6 to 8 o'clock. In a big auditorium, there was standing room only. These medical students want to make a difference with suicide in our country. And really, it's going to take everyone. Schools cannot do this alone. They need all the agencies. They need the churches. They need physicians. They need parents. Everybody coming forward together and not hesitating to get help. Whether it's your suicidal relative, your suicidal neighbor, and perhaps I'll give you one more example. Okay? My rich brother, and by the way, he has 3 homes. So he just recently went to Marco Island. You ever been to Marco Island? Marco Island is like perfect, okay? There's not a blade of grass that's unkept. So my brother calls me up. Keep in mind, we lost our dad to suicide, so my brother says, I was horrified to find out my next door neighbor held a gun to his head 2 days ago. And my brother was like, what can we do? Let's call him Tom. What can I do to help Tom? Well, did anybody take him to the emergency room 2 days ago? No, unfortunately not. Has anybody removed the guns from his condo? No, I talked to his wife about that. His wife said, you know, they're Tom's guns. I don't think I can remove them. Steve, the guns have to be removed. Scott, what difference would that make? Let's talk about means matters. The research from Harvard, Steve. Take away the guns. And Tom is suffering from an advanced disease. He's very depressed about it. Well, does his doctor know he's depressed? Or his doctor maybe is only treating his Parkinson's? Well, I don't know. Steve, you got to go with him to the doctor. Ask for a referral to a psychologist. And Tom needs to have all of the resources. Well, his Parkinson is so advanced, he can't really push, dial anything, push the buttons. Well, he can push one button and he can tell Siri, I'm thinking about killing myself. I'm very proud of my brother. He went to the doctor with him. He got the guns all removed, locked up, and Tom is now started on an antidepressant. That's not going to solve his Parkinson's, but that's going to help him stay alive and deal much more effectively with his depression. That's what we need. And in Montana, I said Donna and I wrote the state plan for Montana. Montana is #1 in suicides. You know what we said in the introduction? The people in Montana can no longer accept suicide as just a way of life for us and our communities, and especially on our reservations. I hope we can have the next generation of Montanans who know we can do something about this. That's why everything that's being done in your school district is so important. So, the adults that are here, anybody remember in high school somebody talked to you about suicide prevention? Anyone? Unfortunately not. We have to talk about this and move forward with a generation that's going to drastically reduce this problem. Was there any other question or comment? Yes, please shout it out, or the microphone's coming around.
How do we destigmatize the conversation?
I'm sorry, I'm going to...
How do we destigmatize the conversation?
Okay, well, all right. Destigmatize the conversation. We know there's a lot of stigma about seeking mental health services, period. And the idea that some people believe you can't talk about it, or suicide would be some kind of sign of weakness. I believe we destigmatize it through working with our young people, working with parents. I'd like to think that your attendance tonight gave you a lot better understanding of the scope of this problem, a little more confidence in being able to talk about it, recognition that many, many young people have these thoughts, and it's really all about getting help. This is a very challenging issue. We're not going to solve it tonight, but if you feel more comfortable now, when somebody's giving away prized possessions, they make statements about hopelessness, they have dramatic changes in their behavior, they're making out a will, they seemed overwhelmed by their lives. Hopefully you're a little more comfortable saying, are you thinking of giving up? I'm here for you. How can we get you the help you need? We destigmatize it by just being comfortable addressing this as we would any other issue that has to do with medical issues or life issues. Many, many people have these thoughts. And I can assure you that no adolescent is suicidal 24/7. The intervention of any one person can make all the difference in the world. And I'd like to close my comments tonight with a positive story. So know, as I start this story, and I'll share it rather quickly, it is a success story. All right, he's a 15-year-old kid. He lives in Sugar Land, Texas. Mom and stepdad divorced. Let's call him Tom. Tom loved his stepdad. Stepdad moved back to Colorado, ironically. Tom goes to his mom and says, I want to go live with Dad. I want to go to Jersey Village High School in Cypress, Fairbanks. His mom laughed. You haven't lived with your dad since you were like 3 years old. He's not going to take you in. By the way, I met his dad later. His dad said, I didn't know much about having a kid in my house. It's just me, but I had plenty of room. Tom, move in. We'll do the best we can. Tom's a new student in a high school of 3,500. I'll be honest, I wouldn't want to be a new kid in a large high school. Tom right away met a girl, and I'm going to call her Cheryl. Tom put a lot of emphasis on that relationship. Tom and Cheryl start going together. Tom had had a previous history with substance abuse. He liked to drink and he liked to smoke his pot. But Tom's not really using substances. He's going with Cheryl. Things are okay for a while. He's passing his courses. Then he gets a job after school. One day he doesn't show up for work. He got high instead. His employer finds out why Tom didn't show up. Tom gets fired. Now he bounces a few checks. He can't pay for the repairs on his truck in Northwest Houston, Texas. On a Sunday night, Cheryl breaks up with him. Tom took all the aspirin that were in the bottle. The next morning, luckily for Tom, he is awake. His dad said, I thought he had a virus. I thought he was sick. Tom, can I take you to the doctor? Tom, should I stay home with you? Tom is like, Dad, you go to work. I'm going to go to school. But over the next couple of days, Tom's not really in his classes. He's driving recklessly. He's getting high every day. He's not taking pride in his appearance. Cheryl can't quite put her finger on it. But by Thursday of that week, you could call it divine intervention, premonition. You could call it sheer luck. Cheryl feels compelled to go open up Tom's locker. She knows the combination. She finds a note. To paraphrase it, and it was addressed to her, Dear Cheryl, don't blame yourself after I'm gone. Goodbye forever. Love, Tom. Now, the critical issue here, most kids try to solve this on their own. Or they say, well, I'll get in touch with him. If he's not better by the weekend, maybe I'd look to an adult for help. Cheryl knew better than that. Why? 10th grade health. And this is key information we have to put in our health classes as opposed to making everything in today's world so academic. Okay, so now, Cheryl goes to the counseling office. It's a busy, crowded place. All the doors are shut. Cheryl doesn't sit down and take a number. She goes, I need help. I need it now. Counselor comes out, sees the panic on her face, reads the note, says, come with me. Now they're in Principal Truitt's office. Sit right here. We're going to search the campus. We will find Tom. They come back about 30 minutes later. He is nowhere to be found. Now the principal could have said, we go on home now, Cheryl. We'll check on this tomorrow. Instead, he turned to her and said, you must know where he lives. You do? Okay. Turned to an assistant and said, we're going to Tom's house right now. Call his dad. Tell his dad to meet us at his home. Call Scott Poland. Tell him to meet us there. You know, I believe we arrived moments after Tom did. He opened the door. He says, why is everybody here? The principal said, Tom, we got a lot of things to talk about. You need to invite us in. Your dad will be here soon. Now you're wondering, what was Tom's plan? Here's what he told me. I've been drinking all day. I went home to get the gun. I planned to kill myself. So now you're wondering, what was the outcome? Did he ever get back together with Cheryl? No, he didn't, but he thanked her. He was inpatient for 1 week. He was outpatient for a couple of months. And Cy-Fair has this nice tradition. They name schools after people. Mr. Truitt sadly died. There was a school named for him. We went back. There are hundreds of people at the reception. I spotted Donnie Sue Johnson. That was Tom's counselor that day. I went up to her and said, I remember every aspect of that day so vividly. Whatever happened to that kid? Funny you would ask that, Scott. I saw him in the grocery store just a couple of weeks ago. Got two of the cutest little girls. Now, if he were to walk through that door right now, would he immediately say his life's wonderful? Probably not. He'd just say, I'm glad to be alive. And many school personnel, and some of you as parents, some of you as students, you've probably already saved lives. But we can save more lives by not hesitating, knowing what to do. One of my best buddies, this was some years ago, but his son came to him and said, you know, after I broke up with my girlfriend, she's taking it really hard. She's threatening to kill herself. Rick turned to his son Carl and said, get your coat, Carl. Carl said, why do I need my coat? It's cold outside, and we're going to her home right now. That's the kind of action we need in our society. And thank you so much for listening.